get into the whole synthesis thing? Because you're, as well as being a manufacturer, you're a performer, you do a whole kind of stuff.
It was a sort of dualistic situation where I was concurrently working as a musician using synthesizers and building my own DIY type projects and learning about electronics at the same time. So I had kind of two professional paths happening in parallel, and only in the last handful of years have the techno artists started to care about modular synthesizers, and it has merged in some strange fashion. I started my brand in 2014, but had been using modulars since 1993 or something. So it was a slow evolution to a place where my music making and my synthesizer building or servicing coalesced.
So did you get straight into modular, or was it actually, did you start with kind of regular synthesizer, or was modular kind of the thing that made you?
Well, I started with electronic music very young, 12 or 13 years old, and initially had keyboards and drum machines and that kind of thing. And then in the early 90s started with the analog synthesizers at a time when you could still buy a TB303 for $100, this kind of thing. And collected quite a lot of analog synthesizers, but mono synths, more packaged type. But at that time, in the early to mid 90s, started to be interested in modulars. So there weren't companies making new ones then, so it was vintage. And I bought a Korg MS-50 and an MS-10, and I got a EMS VCS-3 used for $400. So
you got one in the US as well.
Yeah,
wow.
and originally the first series. So it's the number on the inside is 27. So it must be from
Have you still got it?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
But started to get into modular stuff that I could find, because it, of course, was made in significantly lower numbers than the mono synths were. And when I got that VCS-3 in '94 or something like that, it was clear that I had very rudimentary electronics knowledge at that point. So I was fixing this and that here and there, but there were some things that I couldn't get working on it, and I was given a phone number for somebody who I was told, this guy can fix it. He can fix anything. So I called this number and talked to this guy, and he said, no, I don't fix synthesizers for people anymore. But wait, where did you get this? And what, all that question. I just bring it over. I hate to see these things not working. And so I went over to this guy's house, and he had a museum of modulars, and he had a Synthene Putney and an ARP 2600 and an 8-panel Surge and 50 Space Buchla 200 and Music Easel, and just on and on and on, everything. And he showed me the synthesizer that he was developing that would be a new product. And so it became clear to me that this was somebody that I had to create a friendship with. And he was 20 years older than me, so it was, my parents probably didn't care too much for the idea of me going over to the creepy uncle's house, but his name's Grant Richter, so he was developing the weird or wired synthesizer at that time, and I worked for him really not as a job, but more as an apprenticeship, or an internship. And learned a lot. And at that time, he was the specialist in working on Buchla systems because he had them, but also anybody else who had one, if there was a problem, he was the one repairing it. And that gave me the opportunity to see what he was doing with those, and to use the instruments that he had, and to learn about the process of making a product, and all of the steps along the way that are the black arts that there's no way to learn about except from someone. That I learned those from him, And then as time went on, 10 years after that, he sort of passed that torch to me. So I became the specialist in the Buchla stuff because he didn't really want to take care of doing repairs. Or
I guess as they get older and older, the repairs get more and more frequent and more, yeah.
Yeah, but also Buchla stuff was kind of designed on the brink, really pushed to the limit, packed with so much electronics and really designed in a way that they have a tendency to break down more because there's so much going on and they're so densely packed with possible failure points that they're also a maintenance project anyway, but then also they're so rare that there weren't a lot of people who were capable of taking care of them because the information was scarce and a lot of times the documentation was non-existent or incorrect. So in a way, it's an archaeological dig every time that something comes.
You might have the one that they made differently, for instance. Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah.
I've been in situations where I laid 3 of the same module next to each other, and they were totally different inside.
So I'm curious how, because I mean, you make techno with kind of West Coast kind of sounding equipment, and yet the norm is the 303, the SH101, all of that stuff. How did you kind of integrate that? I mean,
yeah, perhaps it's they're strange bedfellows. The normal path is, you're right, for techno is a kind of path of least resistance. What can I use that will most quickly create what I'm finished product that I'm trying to get, and that's never really been the frame of mind that I was in. I always wanted to focus on the process, and I think that the charm of modulars in general is that you don't have the possibility of relying on the same preset over and over again, particularly instruments that don't have anything configured from the beginning, where you're walking up to an instrument where if you don't patch in cables, then no sound will come out. I think that encourages experimentation or encourages sound design as part of the music making process.
and that's very much the West Coast philosophy, I guess, isn't it, as well?
I suppose, but the idea of West Coast synthesis is really recent, I think. I mean, of course, there are concepts that existed the whole time there have been synthesizers. I mean, the term really comes from the fact that in the very beginning of synthesizers, there was Bob Moog in New York and there was Don Buchla in California, and that's where the East Coast and West Coast thing comes from. And really, it's a difference of these 2 design philosophies from the beginning. It's not really a difference of coasts, it's a difference of people. But
Easy terminology.
Yeah, the Don Buchla philosophy of synthesizer, or he would never say synthesizer, of electronic instrument design has always appealed to me more because he was absolutely unconcerned with making a product or making business. He was interested in making art and making an instrument that could be used to make music, and not a tool where he could list off the features and show you that this is better than that because it can do this and this and this. It was more about the way that it inspires a musician to make music. And he said that if you design your product or your device from the interface or you create a musical interface first and then figure out how to make electronics do that, it can't go obsolete, because it doesn't really matter if it's digital or analog, or if it's wavetables, or if it's additive or carpless strong or whatever. It doesn't matter for music. What matters is that you create an interface that inspires some sort of path for creating music. So then, theoretically, with that philosophy, 50 years later, as we are now, those instruments are still valid for making music. It doesn't matter that discrete transistors are an old way of doing it, or Vactrols are an old way of doing it. That doesn't really make any difference as long as it's designed with the intention of making music and not competing over specs or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's quite an important distinction, actually. So, you went from, you were fixing and working on your own kind of DIY instruments into the kind of now manufacturing your own modules and series of kind of sets of modules, which are very much in the kind of, loosely would fit into more the Don Buchla the camp of synthesis, shall we say. How did that transition come about? I mean, did someone say, you should release these, or did you have a light bulb moment?
No, there was. What happened was I was acting as this Buchla specialist, tech, repairing Buchla systems, and then I started to make some custom modules that worked in Buchla systems, one at a time. Essentially, the next step after DIY would be to start to make something that is kind of a product, but made boutique, one at a time, and developed some sort of reputation for doing those things, and started to make contacts in the industry of synthesizers through that. And actually, it was Sean from Analog Haven who started working on me. He said, you really should be bringing your ideas to a bigger audience, and you should get into Euro, because this is a growing community, and this is where the real people are buying these instruments, and this is a place where you can find young people who are interested in moving forward with these ideas moving forward, rather than searching for vintage instruments. And it's, in a way, the scene of collecting vintage instruments is a bit of a lottery. The lucky breaks and also privilege. People who have, particularly Buchlas now, they're so rare and were so expensive in the first place, that if one goes up for sale, you could buy your country house or your Buchla. So it doesn't create a situation where regular people or musicians, the average musician has no chance of having one of these. So only through Eurorack is a huge revolution for modular synthesizers, because now we can have a system with all different manufacturers of modules all together, whereas through the history of modulars, it was all one. Each brand had their own format, which meant that you buy into the entire. Basically, you were entering the family of the manufacturer, because when you made
that's the only choice you have. Yeah.
Right. Once you'd committed to this brand or this format, then that was all you could put into the system. So it didn't afford the possibility of.
So it's democratizing in a very big way, I suppose. I mean, that's the thing, that it's certainly in terms of making it more available. So, what did you want to achieve? I mean, did you want to make a complete system? Because your systems, you've got one with you here, that downstairs that you've been showing. I mean, is that a complete system? I mean, for instance, you're performing. Are you going to be using that in performance, or have you got a different system for that?
When I perform now, I use the actual system that I'm showing at the shows. That system is one of every one of the modules that we're making now. So it's not curated in some way. Like I tend to use harmonic oscillators, so I have 4 of them. It's not like that. It's one of each. All of my modules were designed with the intention of making music with them. So in a sense, the choices that are made for the interface or the features are based on what I would want to use as a musician. So that means that they're the perfect tools for me to make music, because they were designed in that way. Which, in a way, I thought that I was admitting defeat as a musician by going into full business as a synthesizer manufacturer, but all of the people around me seemed to understand it in a different way, that this was a rebirth of me as a musician. Where
So you've been doing more performance and more musical work since you've been making your own stuff.
Exactly. What my partner and girlfriend Sonia said was that people will want to see you perform using your instrument so that they can see how it is intended to be used. And in a way, I think it's been a revolution. In a small way, it's been a revolution for the way that the Eurorack manufacturers, who are my friends, view the business of being a synthesizer manufacturer, because before there was never the idea that the manufacturers should be performing or showing. We had product demos, but we didn't have performances. I mean, historically, a lot of manufacturers have had endorser, artists, existing artists say, this guy's using our products, and that's a great thing. But they never expected the guy designing the products to be that user. So it's uncharted territory in a way, but
well, it's there couldn't be anyone more perfect, assuming they're a musician,
right,
or able to perform to do that job, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's great. Now we're seeing at the synthesizer events, we're seeing that all of the small manufacturers are now the designer or someone from the team is performing using it, and it only makes sense. So now, with a little bit of hindsight, I can say, yeah, of course, that's natural that people would want to see that, but somehow going in, it didn't occur to me that would be the case.
I do. I mean, I guess the thing I'm getting at as well is, do you think that the fact that you're using your equipment and that the style of synthesis that is also makes it stand out? Because, there are lots of people who do the 4 on the floor, the 909, and wig out a little bit with some filters and a few other bits and pieces. It seems very unsophisticated. And do you find that you can bring more sophistication into your brand of the way that you do things, or?
I don't know if it's more sophisticated. I think that in a way, for a customer to see me use the instrument, I think it makes it less pretentious. I think that they can then look at me using it and say, yeah, now it makes sense to me. It's perfectly natural. No, these are not complicated functions. These are user-oriented functions. I think that some of the quirky things that I do in a different way than another manufacturer does, maybe they start to seem like functions that are musician-oriented, and by design, they're different because they're more usable in a live context or in a music making context, and hopefully every decision that I make as an instrument designer is a decision that's made for the purpose of using the product to make music, rather than something that's based on engineering or on trying to simplify manufacturing or something like that.
Or I need to have a filter of this type or whatever, yeah.
Oh yeah, marketing. We noticed that your product line doesn't have this or that. You should do one of those because those sell really well. I mean, who cares? It's
a very interesting, different business model. Do you find that? Do you find that the Eurorack system has somewhere to go? Because there's the internal busing. There are various things. Are there things that you would like to maybe think? Because as a designer, there must be things you think actually, it'd be great if we could incorporate some additional standards so that then I could do X or Y.
Well, there was a meeting yesterday about this. Some of the manufacturers together here talking about that, because some of the undefined things like the length of a trigger or the level of a gate or the voltage level of an envelope or something like that. Yeah, I think it would be smart to standardize some of that stuff, because as it is now, we are able to plug every manufacturer of Eurorack, plug them in the same cases or whatever, but sometimes you have one module that is designed with the idea of the envelope having a 5-volt range, and another module that's expecting a 10-volt range, and that means that you can't even open the VCA all the way with that envelope or something like that, which is problematic. At the moment, without those kinds of standards, each designer has to commit to his own set of standards. So within the systems, if you're using all my modules together, the ranges of things actually make some sense together. But if you bring in another manufacturer, it's possible that we have some
mismatch.
Discontinuity.
That's a good word.
But I don't know, maybe that's part of the fun of it. I hope that as time goes on, as an industry, we get smarter and we get more compatible. But we also have to maintain our individual identities. So I don't want to create standards that are so specific that it's like in the UK, you love to create new genres of music. You love to more increasingly specific micro genres, to a point where if the micro genre is so specific, then it's impossible to do anything creative within it, because in order to meet the standards, then it's like the same thing over and over again.
So, I mean, in terms of synthesis, are you kind of, where does your energy and your focus now lie? Are you more interested in creating more modules, or are you more interested in doing more music, or do they have to coexist? I mean, how do you balance those two things?
The music making and the instrument design have to coexist, and in a sense, I think that the more that they blur together, the more successful both of them can be for me. It's a real fundamental part of what my instrument manufacturing company is based on, is the idea of me as a user and what I'm designing. Me as a musician and me as a synthesizer, a specialist of some kind, and the pedigree of coming from working on Buchla systems and using them and owning Buchla instruments, that informs my decisions about how something should be, but also what I want to use when I'm doing a performance or a recording. So I can't actually eliminate one. It's
the
like
requirements of the music will drive a kind of need for something to fulfill the direction you want to go in creatively.
Exactly. And an example of that, which unfortunately I don't have a solution, but when I'm out in a lot of places playing shows with other modular guys, and sometimes I'm invited to being, all modular night, and I'm playing in it, I notice that everyone on the stage has their Eurorack module or modular, and then on the side this Mackie mixer, or like small mixer. So it naturally would say to me, maybe we've missed something. So maybe it's time that the features of this mixer are integrated into the modular in some way. I mean, I don't have that product, but it's an example of how the scene can really start to suggest what it needs by.
I guess the challenge is, and this is something I notice more and more, Eurorack is a small format mixer, and yet mixers are kind of traditionally need a certain amount of space to be able to operate in.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. You want your channel strips to be long enough to have everything in line, to have multiple sends, equalizers, whatever things, and you can't exactly do that in 3 rack spaces of height.
Exactly, and the other thing I've been noticing as well is the way that, because of the nature of the patching of a modular, a patch obscures itself physically, so it's actually much harder to operate once you've patched it all up. And that seems, the Mother 32 is quite interesting because they put it to the side, and you get the same with the MS-20, but that sort of can't work, but it feels like a problem that also needs to be solved somehow.
Well, there is an entire camp whose school of thought is that the the controls and the jacks should be separated from each other for that reason. I think it can be challenging to associate the patch points with the controls that are related if they're physically separated. Actually, when I was beginning in this stuff and Grant was showing me what he was going to bring to market, his primary point of pride in his design was the fact that he had learned from the Aries modular to have all of the jacks on the bottom and all of the controls on the top, and that would be my single criticism of his design style, was that I always using the wired was that the controls, the modules would have 20 functions in one module, which sometimes it would be hard to know if this VCA that's part of this module, is this the control that goes with these three jacks? It's really confusing. And in a way, panel design should be an indication of signal flow. I think it's more important to have the more important controls, bigger knobs on those, and build the arrangement around what is a natural, comfortable way to deal with the parameters. And also, I feel like there should be signal flow, like inputs should be at the left or the bottom, and that outputs should be at the top or the right, and so everything is sort of moving in one direction. And that the patching should be near the controls that are associated with it. So
it's challenging because there's such a limited amount of space, isn't there? Unless you then make the Eurorack panels really big, and then you go into another.
Yeah, well, and you also, you're right, a mixer is bordering on impossible to make in a graceful fashion with this philosophy, because the last thing you want is to have all of your input cables right in the way of your volume controls, and it's a challenge to make it to fit this theoretical format, or this thread of consistency about how things are arranged, and also make it comfortable for performing. I don't have all the answers.
No, it's an ongoing process. So you're performing tonight. I mean, you're like some crazy time in the morning. You're going to be doing
4:40, yeah.
4:40 in the morning, right? Is that by design? 4:40 sounds somehow kind of like some musical relevant time to be performing.
I will only be using the pitch of A. Well, the Germans are very specific and time-oriented people, so they must have something in mind there.
And so, how long does set you up? What do you do for something like this? Do you just follow your nose, or do you prepare a patch beforehand? What do you do?
I try to make it totally unique each time. So that means that there is the possibility that I could have a bad day and it doesn't go very well. But I think that the essence of performance should be that there's the possibility that it could go horribly wrong. Otherwise, there'd be no reason for anyone to pay attention. I think the same reason we watch someone juggle knives or something like this. It's like we hope that he isn't hurt, but the possibility that he could be hurt is really, we don't want to miss it if it goes wrong. So it's just part of what it all is, and that danger is hopefully adding to the interest level.
Mark, thank you very much for talking to us. Good luck with the gig tonight.
Thank you.